Welcome back to the Fiffe Files. I'm Michel Fiffe, cartoonist, creator of Copra and tons of other comics. What I also do is I like to look at other artists who've inspired me, cartoonists who have long influenced my work and my career, and and I love examining this stuff. But primarily, this is the third episode of a huge Keith Giffen retrospective in which I go into deep dive detail into his entire visual history, meaning everything he drew, I want to examine, I want to look at, I want to sort of trace from root to finish of what he did, of what he put on paper for decades. And so in the first episode, we covered his breaking into the industry, his burnout, or not quite burnout. Well, we did cover that. The first episode was really him breaking into the industry, working for a few years, and things didn't work out. So he took a 2-year break. He came back. DC gave him a second shot. And that's when he started taking off as a penciler, primarily for the Legion of Superheroes. And then for the second episode, we talk about the burnout from that Legion of Superheroes, a very pivotal run, a very popular book of its time, along with Paul Levitz. Keith Giffen drew it until he just couldn't draw it any longer. So he changed his style and he worked on tons of other things. And so now for this third episode, I want to take a look at that next shift, which includes going to other companies and returning to DC in a major way. And so I want to start off with this issue of Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man. Now, again, he's mostly known as a DC guy, but he did start out at Marvel, and he went back to Marvel a couple times throughout his career, giving them tons of great comics. And this one, it's easy to miss. It's got this 25th anniversary border that all the Marvel comics of this specific month had, this dressing. And he didn't draw the cover, but once you open it up, you realize that it's Giffen all the way. I mean, this is inked by Vinnie Colletta, which you wouldn't know. Vinnie Colletta is famous for inking Kirby, inking lots of DC in the 70s. Speaking of a polarizing figure, I mean, he was known to dominate the penciler, really, but this is a rare case of him not doing that. You could still see Giffen. You wouldn't even know that it was Vinnie Colletta inking him. Now, the thing about the previous episode was that we closed it off with a controversy of Keith Giffen being accused of swiping an entire style wholesale from another artist, Jose Munoz. And so we kind of unpacked that, his thinking behind that, his application of that swiping, of that appropriation of style. And we see that Keith Giffen lessened his work in a way. He started shifting away from bigger projects and penciling less and doing more layouts for people. And then this one issue is an example of that, of just kind of taking what perhaps was an inventory story written by Bill Mantlo, by the way, who was his first collaborator, Keith's first writer who he worked with at Marvel. Now he's back, and now they're working on this story that's somewhat standalone. I'm not familiar with this title's arc, but I do know this issue, and it's easy to follow, but it's very stylized. I mean, Keith Giffen still has that Munoz-ism, which is, that's those specific backdrops, these profiles, these side characters that are very cartoony, very sinister looking, shrouded in shadow half the time. Really great stuff. And again, as we've learned so far, is that Keith Giffen has taken it into and made it his own. Like he's shedding this influence little by little, but right now it's on its last legs, the Munoz isms, and that's Vinnie Colletta all the way, trying to do a John Romita face. That is not a Keith Giffen face, but Spider-Man is a perfectly suited character for his style. I mean, you weren't seeing this kind of Spider-Man in the regular books. You weren't seeing this sort of panel breakdown, these sort of moodier shots, these atmospheric shots. And this is pretty much a done in one. You could just pick it up and appreciate it for what it is. And I love it. It's sort of a hidden gem. That's a that's a great Giffen Munoz panel. Again, you will be seeing this for a little bit longer. We're almost out of the woods. Great splash page. I mean, that's fantastic. That huge those huge hands in the foreground framing this. That's a Kirby thing. And that's what we talked about too in the previous episodes if you missed it, is going through Keith's influences of the times, starting with Kirby, leading up to maybe a George Perez, and then eventually landing on going through a Toth blip, a Trevor Von Eden blip, super interesting comics, and then Munoz. So that's what we're seeing here. Great action shot. I mean, these are really cool looking Spider-Man comics, especially for its time. This is obviously pre-McFarlane, so we still don't have that visual treatment, but it's around the corner. Now, he did work for Marvel, but he still did some things for DC. So we're going to look at these Hex issues real quick. These were written by Michael Fleischer. And again, some Jose Munoz isms, but you could still tell that it's Giffen. It's got the same the gutterless block of panels. He's now leaning into that real heavy. This was printed in 86. So now we're approaching, yeah, we're late 86. We're going to be covering the years 80 86 to 88, 89 today. So it's only a few years, but there's a lot to unpack because he was a workhorse. He kept busy, even though he was retreating in a way from like bigger projects, he would actually return with some heavy duty projects of his own to sort of make up for lost time, as it were. But right now, he was just plugging in. He was just doing fill in stuff. This book, I believe, was ending, was about to get canceled. So they just called upon Keith to come in and finish it up and just have fun with it. Sort of a futuristic dystopian setup, kind of like this Legion of Superheroes, which is right up his alley. That's his bread and butter, pretty much. He's been known for that. So he drew this cover, great striking cover. He drew this one, a little less striking, a little bit busier, but it's still cool. And this is some mid 80s printing on DC's part. It's pretty unpredictable. I think they were switching from from metal plates to plastic plates, and that affected some of the coloring for a certain couple of months. You could really tell in the yellows too, but the line work isn't compromised. It still looks great. These are still cool looking comics. I mean, again, Keith Giffen plays with the form whenever possible, which is almost always. Final issue. He also drew this cover, kind of a quiet cover, the last Hex story, if you say so. I believe it. I'm getting this for the visuals. These look really cool. I had never read Hex comics up to this point. Maybe I've looked at a couple Garcia Lopez ones, but that's Jonah Hex. This is the futuristic version of Jonah Hex. And so again, Keith Giffen was the perfect artist for this stuff. He gets to see himself mounted in a wax museum. I mean, great creepy stuff. Speaking of which, Taboo, the anthology led by Steve Bissette, of artist on Swamp Thing. This is one of the earlier issues. I believe it's the first issue, and it's got Keith Giffen and his main collaborator at this point, which is Robert Loren Fleming, co-creator of Thriller, writer of Ambush Bug, tons of other comics. And so they did this creepy little story. And I actually recently got to see the original art for this at the Billy Ireland Museum. They gracefully pulled it out for me. Graciously pulled it out for me. And gracefully, to be honest. And I got to say, the one thing I noticed about these, this is the page I saw. It was pretty clean. It was pretty clean stuff. He wasn't, not too many paste ups, not too much pencil work. He'd probably just apply the ink straight to these pages. Again, he was doing fill-ins, short stories, pinups, such as this for the Strip AIDS benefit book. Just did these 2 pages, him and Robert Lauren Fleming. Again, same sort of Munoz profiles. These profiles where there's like nothing. There's no chin. There's barely a nose. It's funny looking stuff. I love it. It's very Munoz. These sort of like urban backdrops where it's just tiny little windows that suggest a cityscape. Leaves more to the imagination than not. It's not overly rendered, but it is busy. It just gives it's an optical illusion almost. It's great. Here we see a panel that he would later utilize a lot. This sort of not only the 9 panel grid, but this sort of cropping of one eye, corner, nose, and mouth. That is to me a very specific Giffen staple. And it begins in this era, in this kind of when he's beginning to get out of the Munoz years and coming into the next phase in what I'll call the pure Giffen stuff. And again, he's just an accumulation of all his influences, and Munoz was one of them, and part of that will remain for a while, you know. Now this is a print, a Godzilla print. Not sure quite what that says. I noticed that there's a little K right there, which is possibly his signature. He doesn't really sign his books like that or his work like that. He usually never inks his stuff. This is a print based on this comic. He did a pinup for this Godzilla comic around this time. And for some reason they made a print. I thought it was official. I don't know if it is, but here's the original. Pretty cool pinup. I see the K. So, and then this is the print. And I actually first saw this as a print, so I had to get it thinking it was official because there's a copyright information, and I'm just naive enough to fall for it. When I received it, it just looks like a glossy bootleg, and that's fine. But then I had to search this out, and I got this. This is way cooler and on this newsprint. This is fine. I'm glad it's in print because I thought this was some sort of official movie tie-in, just similar to the Superpowers piece, the presentation piece that was only used in-house. Someone made a print out of it. Probably got it from online because that's where I saw it. That's where I saw these things. Anyway, back to Marvel. Remember the Who's Who? Those are sort of the character profiles with the information on all these characters, the backstory. Marvel had their own version, which came out a little before. And so this is the Book of the Dead. These are all characters that have long been dead. Many of them have come back from the dead. This is Jacob Fury, also known as Scorpio. If you remember from episode 1, he drew this character in his run on Defenders. Great Kevin Nolan rendering a full color. But anyway, this is a cool, rare Giffen piece for Marvel's Ohatmu, official handbook of the Marvel Universe. It's kind of cool. I believe it's inked by Joe Rubinstein, who inked all of these passages. And then in this one, now we're getting into new universe territory. In this one, this Conan issue, not many comics have this ad, but it has this Justice ad. Justice was one of the new universe titles, spearheaded by then editor-in-chief Jim Shooter, brand new slate of books. With I think the creative team switched early on. There's a whole history behind it. Luckily, we got some Keith Giffen comics out of it, and it started with Justice. And this is a Giffen cover inked by Jeff Isherwood, who I believe was the artist before Giffen. But anyway, that's pretty much that ad was this splash page, just with a different color treatment and less, no, the difference is in lettering. But other than that, that's pretty much it. The inker is Rick Bryant. It's not the only time he's inked Keith Giffen, or won't be, but I don't know. These are pretty interesting in that, again, it's Keith Giffen being a team player. You need something, you got something for me. It's just a job. It's not like he loved justice necessarily, but he wasn't being a prima donna. I think this is an important element in Keith Giffen's outlook and career. Now that doesn't look very much like Giffen. I'm sure that Rick Bryant just remodeled that face and statted that panel. That's an easy thing to do, easy enough. Now here are the rest of the new universe. He didn't do many. He just did a few more Justice issues, a Nightmask, and a Starbrand. And Justice, he had a straight run of that. Now you see that it's still got that element of Munoz. You know, that's just pure Giffen. That's a creepy, hilarious looking character. It looks really fun to draw. This as well. This is all very. This is going to turn essentially into a Fist of the North Star comic. It's just a fight comic, just a huge battle, pretty bloody, pretty violent, especially for its time. Just this dude's digging his fingers into the back of the other dude's head. Same with his hands. I mean, it's great gnarly stuff, and you could tell this is Keith channeling that manga energy, not only in the way he's drawing fights, but in his character designs. A sleek female, a creepy henchman, which again, it's got that style, it's got that European style. Not to say Munoz too often, but it is a big deal. It is a big presence in his work that is undeniable. That's the money shot. That's the big. It's such a cool thing. This, I gotta say, this is just cooler than it has any right to be. This is as cool as New Universe got. You know what I mean? And there's some good work in those comics. I know it's oftentimes panned, but that was the marketplace. Do they age well? Well, I think visually these issues do. I think these are great. This is Giffen flexing these specific muscles, he's training, he's keeping up. He hasn't quit drawing yet. He's still drawing, he's still being employed. He's just an artist here. He's not plotting. He's not developing the arc. And also he's, for the first time, I've noticed he's doing this three-tiered long screen, widescreen approach, which wasn't called widescreen back then. That was then made popular in the 2000s. But he's doing a lot of that. He was doing that in the previous issue, but he's really leaning into it here, giving it a sort of uniformity that serves the story. A huge, nice splash. I love his use of smoke and just blast steam. It's very kinetic. It's very organic. It's cool. Looks great. Nice little color hold. Nice final splash page. And it's his last issue of Justice. Now with Nightmask, same thing. Lots of Munoz-isms. This one's a little denser. There's a Justice crossover, so he's still drawing the same character. But this is a great shot. Again, underrated as a mood setter. He sets the vibe with these established shots. Like he really does. And they do feel claustrophobic, but open. It's not too busy. It's not annoyingly busy. It's not show offy. It's just, he gives you just enough information. whether it be characters or background billboards or flying newspaper trash. It's cool stuff. Now, this seems to be a little denser story wise, and I'm sure it was written in a Marvel style. Again, Rick Bryant inking. I'm sure he was just given a plot and he just sort of drew stuff and the script was written over it. Although this looks so specific, it might have just had a plot. It might have had just a script for, who knows. I should point out this is Kevin Maguire, future artist of Justice League and collaborator of Keith's. So it's interesting to see them back to back here. He was slated to draw Codename Spitfire. That never happened. He was slated to draw Silver Surfer, Kevin Maguire. That never happened. DC scooped him up. This is Bob Wycheck inking, Terry Bates writing. And this still looks this is the Jim Shooter, John Romita Jr. title. So Keith Giffen is trying to stay loyal to that visual hook. It's got that specific nose, that specific angle of a face. This is all very John Romita Jr. while still being clearly Keith Giffen, but now he goes to like a Kirby mode for just this character. So it's almost back to his own roots of his Kirbyisms. The way he would block a figure or have this angle. Yeah, this is definitely a throwback to his own style, to his Kirby obsession. Which, by the way, the way he described it, in speaking of those Kirby years, is that's just the way Marvel, by Marvel, he meant Jim Shooter, wanted the comics to look. But I remember hearing something about, or reading a John Byrne interview where he says that people took that the wrong way. Shooter didn't want people to draw like Kirby. He just wanted artists to have that Kirby dynamic, that clarity of storytelling. I believe Keith Giffen just wanted to draw like Kirby because it's fun and it's one of his influences. But I'll take his word for it. He thought his bosses wanted Kirby. He gave them Kirby. So, issue of Daredevil, fill in with Innocenti writing it. He developed this villain with her, who's connected to the Barry Windsor Smith issue project. Is it Project Born Again? It's a sort of a post super soldier character. Great stuff, creepy stuff. He draws again in that Munoz way, but he draws a great Black Widow. Oh, classic Keith Giffen profile. He snuck that in. He stopped doing that for a while, and then he does it occasionally. This huge profile, taking up the size of the page. A tragic story, sad story, but we get a cool shot or a cool scene of Daredevil fighting in the sewers, this funky sewer, all different angles, just great stuff. Really nice. You never see Black Widow like this. Very, very peaceful, very delicate, like an old 70s romance comic or something. Just really elegant stuff. Mixed in with the grotesque nature of this character and his approach. They made a good team. Innocenti and Giffen, they made a great team. I don't think they worked together again. I don't think they ever crossed paths. I want to bring this into it. Comics Week. This is a magazine that didn't last very long. Only a handful of issues, if I believe. And it was spearheaded by Mark Waid. And I guess he was going to put these out weekly. I'm not positive about that, but this is a cool snapshot into my favorite era of comics. Now, what we're going to talk about Keith Giffen today, that era is my favorite, obviously, because it's what I grew up with. So I have this sort of innate visceral love for this stuff that we're going to talk about, but also it coincides with a phase of his artistic style that is never talked about like at all because it didn't last for too long. But I find it super interesting, and I think it's an important step in the evolution of where he eventually landed. And so this huge interview with him and Robert Lauren Fleming, this was interesting because it's, it's not that it's brutal, but they're very blunt. It's almost like they're over it. Here, let's see if we could just see the whole thing here. They're very blunt. They're sort of, they're talking about their previous comic called The March Hare and how that's where these panels are from and how that wasn't a great experience. And they're talking about the, ambush bug and their future projects. And, it's just cool. This is just a cool artifact, right? But the interview itself is neat because in previous interviews you get a joyful, optimistic Keith, and then you get someone who's already flexing his fan favorite muscles, and here he's already feeling the sting of criticism, and how he's responding to it is just being a blunt kind of subject. He's just telling it how it is. He's not burning bridges, but he's not mincing words. And it's interesting to have Robert Lauren Fleming join in on that, be caught up in that whirlpool of not negativity, but again, he's not going to suffer fools, Keith Giffen. Now let's see. Around this time, this print came out. This is a real print. This is the real deal. This is an actual print that came with the History of the DC Universe portfolio in for their 50th anniversary. Now he inked this himself. You can see it. I'm going to put it like that. Of course, he gets Dr. Fate. He's associated with Dr. Fate. This is how he signs his name usually when he's doing it. Giffen. That little Godzilla K was curious. Yeah, so this is just really cool. It's huge, as you could tell. Just gonna put it here for a second. But around this time, he also did some work for the Ghostbusters cartoon. He wrote just one episode, I think, with Lauren Fleming, Buster the Ghost. I've never seen it, but I know that that's a credit. Around this time, Mike Barr, the editor who got him work on the Legion, was quoted as saying that you never know what you're going to get with Keith these days. Something, I'm paraphrasing, but sometimes you want a Batman drawing, you're just going to get an eye. So that's just a mild jab at the weirdness of Keith Giffen's work, of the direction that he's been taking. Again, it's starting to polarize fans. At first, I think fans were on board. They were in love with his super slick superhero style for the Legion of Superheroes. And then when he started straying from that because he was just burnt out on that style, he started doing simpler, bolder renditions or renderings of characters on top of doing experimental layouts and page design. So that turned a lot of people off, but it earned him like a new audience. I feel like, it's either you loved him or you hated him. There was really no in between, coupled with the fact that the ambush bug humor thing really took off, and that kind of became his MO. That's the way Keith Giffen was seen, as just a humorous guy. But anyway, he's proud of that stuff. He's proud of all that stuff. He wasn't hating his stuff too much. He loves the March Hare. Him and Robert Lauren Fleming, they wish they could have done more with that. That never happened, alas. But Dr. Fate, that was I want to say his return to DC, because around this time, the Justice League had come out. And we'll talk about Justice League in a minute, but visually, this was him coming into his own, really. I mean, this is also his main collaboration with James DeMatteis as an artist. James DeMatteis was the writer for the Justice League, but here I just want to kind of go through this stuff, especially in comparison to the previous work. Again, not lots, some Munoz, like this. these kind of characters, but it's printed in this great Baxter stock, which was what I mean by that. It's like the printing's better. It's a little bit more expensive. It was sold in direct markets, in the direct market, meaning in comic book stores, as opposed to just newsstands or supermarkets. That's where you would get something like the Daredevil comic we just saw. That's a direct that's a supermarket item. I mean, this is really cool stuff. That's perfect for Dr. Fate. You know, I personally love this style on any subject matter, but it's fun to see him return to this character. The character really that got him back into comics before the Legion. Great Joker. Man, he just draws such a good Joker, even though it's just a little piece. This is what I'm talking about. Primetime DC, post Crisis, John Byrne era, Bill Sienkiewicz, Ron Frenz, Chuck Patton, Garcia Lopez. I mean, DC was cooking. This is a DC newsletter to retailers. Sometimes it has cool art, really just repurposed from the comics, and this is just from the Dr. Fate comic. Let me see, is this? Yeah, it's from the first issue, just right there, but without the text blocking the art. It's not much. It doesn't block much at all, but it is just neat to see. These are cool if you could find them, just as a specific like just artifacts. That's the house ad, and this is for the magazine Four Color magazine. And that has a handful of issues out. Pretty interesting timestamp, big glossy black and white version. And then this is a back cover for a Legion of Superheroes comic. So it's Baxter stock. So this is also shiny, sturdier, and the colors really pop. And then we have a Booster Gold comic, and this is a house ad in a typical comic, what it would typically look like. And again, this printing is just muddier, substandard, doesn't look as great, but it's still pretty faithful. You still get to see that this is a Keith Giffen vehicle. And I saw this as a kid and I thought it looked fantastic. I mean, I was already into, I already had seen the ambush bug and a little bit of the Omega Men by way of an ad, but this was just cool looking, and it would be years until I actually came upon the issues. And then in this Flash, Butch Guy's first issue, there it is again, another newsprint version, but just different. You never knew what you were going to get in these during these days and these printings, because it's the same month. I would think it's the same printer. It's just a different stock, different. I don't know. These things change all the time, from printer to printer, even in house. So anyway, that's just all the different variations of this, to me, classic house ad. You got the rest of the issues. Striking, simple covers. This one sort of calls back to his earlier work with this ornate cape treatment. Not quite McFarlane-esque, but it's getting there. It's close. It's getting to Spawn territory. But again, I mean, that's Sinner, basically. Again, more great Joker, Two-Face, really cool magical Lords of Order and Lords of Chaos battles. I mean, really, I mean, I love that. That's just creepy. Perfect for the story. He's really good about having these Lords of Chaos be just open mouths, just lips and teeth. Is this Rick Bryant? No. Yeah. Dave Hunt. Dave Hunt. Probably changing that face completely. But yeah, this is what we're talking about. Dan Jurgens, Gene Colan, John Byrne. So that was the second issue. I want to take a look at the third real quick because it features. Well, it's cool to look at. There's that classic huge profile. But this features the Justice League International. Guy Gardner, Mr. Miracle, Martian Manhunter. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Justice League International, oh, there's this Batman. Great, great Batman. Obliterated. Look at that. Can you believe that? Justice League was a book that Keith Giffen actively sought out for years. The way he tells it, he would go to the editor's office, Andrew Helfer, and ask for the book. This is pre-crisis, or maybe around the crisis. And he would be told no. But he had enough juice to be taken seriously eventually because Keith Giffen was, the Legion of Superheroes guy. We've established that he was a fan favorite. He was an industry favorite. He made the company money. He made books. Those books sold, and that matters. So in the post-crisis, when all the books were being rebooted or reshuffled or restarted or what have you, they gave him a shot, but not to draw, because by his own admission, he wouldn't be a good fit for the Justice League. That needed a very straight ahead mainstream person to draw it. And he wasn't a writer, so they would get a scripter to write. And that's where they got James DeMatteis, who was usually just, he had just written, he was a superhero guy, but he had just written the super dark Kraven's Last Hunt for the Spider-Man offices at Marvel. But Andrew Helfer assembled this team of James DeMatteis, Keith Giffen, and the newbie Kevin Maguire to relaunch the Justice League, just as the Justice League, not the Justice League of America, but it was a new title. And that's how that book was born. Now, I just want to pivot real quick to this Amazing Heroes. Here we go. Here we go. That's the Justice League right there. They didn't pick these. I mean, they weren't really in charge of picking these characters. These are the characters that were available to them. It's not like they sought out Blue Beetle or Mr. Miracle or that Guy Gardner. I think it was just available. I think Steve Englehart was done with Guy Gardner in the Green Lantern Corps. He brought him back. And Joe Staton designed this version of Guy Gardner. So he just ended up in the Justice League. I don't think he was poached. Later, Guy Gardner would become super popular in this super popular title, and I believe Steve Englehart was a little put off that Guy Gardner was taken from his book. It's different sources, so believe who you want to believe, but I think the story varies on that one. It's not really a comedic take on these characters, not in the way Ambush Bug was comedic, but it had an irreverence to it, to its tone. It was very much a superhero story, but it had pockets of humor, and eventually the humor dominated the book. But it had moments of darkness as well. It got intense, but I think that was fresh, especially when things were getting grim and gritty. That was the tone of the time, the post Frank Miller Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, Alan Moore tone. This was sort of lighthearted. It didn't take itself so seriously. It read briskly. It looked great. Kevin Maguire was a newbie at that point. Shout out to Ted McKeever, who was one of the Giffen clones. He was a clone, especially around this time. And I say that lovingly, of course. And I think he would admit to that. But he was one of the only, if not the only, Giffen clone around this time. Ernie Colon, shout out to Ernie Colon, who mentions that Keith Giffen not only is a great collaborator, but he describes something in here about how Keith Giffen doesn't use reference, and he uses this as an example, like he wouldn't use reference for a gun, but because he'd rather tell you the story about the gun, or employ it to tell the story. It's so meaning the important thing wasn't to get the gun right. It is just to have a gun to tell the story, and that's the important part. And I thought that was such a fine distinction and an important one because as artists, we're always told you got to reference everything to give it like a realistic take. To really, there's no suspension of disbelief that's being abused, and I get that, And then you get guys like Kirby who just create buildings out of nothing and weapons out of nothing, or you have Punisher artists who have to be really faithful to whatever gun he's using in that scene. It can't just be made up. So I think it's a case by case basis. If you're doing a period piece, obviously you should do reference. If you're drawing teenage superheroes in the future, that doesn't matter quite as much. And I think in the case of Keith Giffen and his general body of work, that's the style that he just had for a long time. In this one, we got that cover of the third issue of Dr. Fate. It's bleached out, but it's still cool to see. And real quick, speaking of the Creeper, he loved the Creeper. He only got to draw him twice before. One for a page in the back of a Flash that promised us, the readership, a Keith Giffen maxi series with the Creeper. That never panned out, but he drew one page, and he also drew him as a guest in DC Comics Presents, teaming up with Superman. Written by Steve Englehart, actually. Speaking of Green Lantern Corps, that issue was written by Steve Englehart, inked by Dick Giordano. Wild stuff. Right here, we see him employing a 9-panel grid, probably an homage to Ditko, who made this grid famous. It was pretty typical in the 60s, especially in Marvel, but Ditko really ran with it, especially with his Charlton work, his Question, Blue Beetle. And yeah, lots of Munoz-isms. I drew a Captain America. Got to call that out because that was Keith's favorite character. Well, his favorite character was Giant Man, but he really wanted to work on Captain America. So it's cool to see him sneak him in. Great splash page. Is this Rick Bryant too? It is Rick Bryant. All right. I think it's worth noting this video jack art, and we'll talk about that in a second, especially with this art right here in this Marvel Age. But that's Kevin Maguire. That's Kevin Maguire playing with Justice League toys, filming them, making a movie with them. But he had just started Justice League. It was now, that's from issue 5. So it's really fresh. It's in its first year. There's a shot of Kevin Maguire actually drawing a page. Can't really make out that page, but it's it's Justice League. Could kind of tell it's Batman in the middle of drawing it. I don't believe he's inking it, so who knows? But it's really interesting because here in this Marvel Age comic, that's one of his covers. This is one of his first published works, and gun to my head, I wouldn't be able to tell you that that's Kevin Maguire at all. Maybe the idea, the sensibility of superheroes relaxing on the day at the beach. That's very Justice League, the Bwahaha era. But this is very, very early Maguire. And so by the way, Maguire would become closely related to Giffen and DeMatteis, and that's going to start affecting Keith. Keith is going to be because Kevin Maguire, what he brought to the table was this. I'll show you a sort of naturalism to comics, and this is just sort of like a clean, quiet approach with, he's known for his expressions, which by the way, comics had some artists that did expressions such as like Howard Chaykin, Dave Stevens, but really, Kevin Maguire was known for his facial expressions and his sort of subdued take on this hyperbolic material Nothing's too overdone. It's just perfect. There's like a quiet confidence to this stuff. And the combination of that, James DeMatteis's sharp scripting, and Keith Giffen's good instinct for plotting a compelling, cool story that moved along, that made a dynamite combination. I mean, it really was DC's flagship book for a bunch of years, but we haven't gotten there yet. That's just about to start. We have Video Jack in the meantime. This is for Marvel's Epic line of creator-owned books. This seems to be a promotional piece because we don't really see this anywhere else ever. And then this is the cover, the actual cover of the first issue. Actually, you don't. You do see it. There we go. You do see it in this Amazing Heroes. So it's making the news. Keith Giffen's back with a project co-owned by Carrie Bates, and then that's the first issue right there. That's what it looks like in color. Shiny stock, kind of Baxter-esque, Baxter paper adjacent. I'm not sure exactly what they use, but it's similar. Printing's better, color's better. Archie Goodwin's the editor. You could trust him to guide a ship. And yeah, so Keith Giffen had a hand in plotting and developing this project. It's an odd project, It's kind of plays with the form a little bit. Is it Hunt or Bryant who inks this? It is Dave Hunt. Dave Hunt. Old school inker, but it gives us this he gives it this nice polish. He gives this stuff a nice cohesive line. A lot of rendering. And this is a funny trick. This is a super panel in which it's really just one image broken up into different panels. In this case, a 12 panel grid that's employed throughout the entire series. But sometimes it's used to show movement, to guide you through something. This is I wouldn't say this is a cheat, but it's basically just one drawing. The formation, the division of panels don't really tell a dramatic scene. So it's not totally necessary, but I think breaking it up like this, it makes it feel at home with the rest of the pages. If it was just one big panel, it's like too intense almost. Like this kind of dilutes it a little bit. So it does make sense. It does serve a purpose, but it's usually used to greater effect elsewhere by Giffen himself too. Great, cool visuals. Everything's really tight. Everything's really up close. Things are getting warped in the story. This is a great example of just a consistent layout. 12 panels, 12 panels, 12 panels. It builds, and then there's this release, you know. That's very much a Ronin thing, a Frank Miller Ronin thing. He would go from a specific grid to just a double page splash for effect. And it's been noted that Ronin being Giffen's favorite Miller thing, I could see that influencing this sort of approach. And back to the 12 panel grid. Again, this stuff came out super sporadically. And so even though I do want to approach this stuff in a chronological order, I don't want to be beholden to the actual release dates because that's likely not the way it was drawn. He probably drew this all in one chunk. I don't think he was juggling this back to back. I think really the only time he juggled projects was back in Legion and Omega Men, and that's why he gave up Omega Men. But for this, he had been away for a while in terms of like a major project, so this maybe wasn't sticking, maybe the sales weren't dynamite, but it's his name, it's his property. He co-owns it with Carrie Bates. But early on, you get different artists coming in and working on this stuff. I mean, that's still very much Giffen and very much Munoz and statting panels, which is a trick that he would start using now. He hadn't really done that up to this point. I think this is the project where he started really doing that. Yeah, so the premise of this book is just very pop culture, video, movie driven. You know, it references all that stuff. You get different artists coming in, you know. It lends itself to the concept. However, it's not a Giffen project fully. It's just for whatever reason, it's just he bailed. He bailed slowly. These issues came out late. Came out late. You get some just different artists trying to do the Giffen, you know, shrouded in shadow face, and that's all that's shrouded in shadow. It's a very cool technique. You know, if you apply real lighting source rules, it you know it loses credibility. But that's not why we're here. That's not why I like this stuff. So I'm not worried about that at all. I just think it's a cool solution to give character to this material. And there's Lords of Chaos approach, lips and teeth as a head. And this issue, the final one, introduces Kevin Maguire. You notice that? Where is it? Where are you? I just saw you. Kevin Maguire. We're talking about Kevin Maguire here, folks. Giffen is completely done with this. He's just done with this project. He's got better things to do. We got Walt Simonson doing a page. This is the Kevin Maguire spread doing Looney Tunes, basically. Yeah, this Giffen is checked out. He's done. He's done, and he will never revisit this again. So I assume Carrie Bates still has the rights to this if he wants to reproduce this or repackage it or revisit it or something. Around the same time, we have that where that Dr.Fate print came from. It came from this portfolio, which was actually a book which reprints the history of the DC universe by Marv Wolfman and George Perez. Right. This also has a fold out poster, a jam piece similar to the Legion of Superheroes 300, and Keith Giffen drew Ragman. He would later work on Ragman, writing and laying out Ragman, but this is so interesting. What a time piece right here. You have Arthur Adams next to Joe Kubert, next to Simonson, next to Jaime. You get that Jaime flash right there. Steve Rude, Steve Lytle, Brian Boland. You got everyone. Gilbert, our man. I mean, come on. This is really stunning. I believe this was a huge mural in the offices at DC. And then in this promotional piece, remember the blue one? Remember this one? This eventually turned into this freebie, this color thing that would actually be given out in comic stores. And I would get tons of these as a kid. And it would have cool covers, cool interviews with people. There's Mike Barron. Just cool updates. But here you have that poster just in black and white. There's that little Giffen. That little Giffen head. It's just a hood, but it's still cool. It's worth noting. Now, I brought this out earlier to show you the virtues of Kevin Maguire. Inked by Al Gordon. Great inker, Al Gordon. The series started with Terry Austin, but then Al Gordon took over. But anyway, this is an important book because the way I see it, Keith Giffen did this backup and he has completely shed the Munoz influence. Completely. Al Gordon's inking him. His staging is the same, but he's locked into something else. He's locked into his own sort of bit of naturalism. And by the way, he's laying out the book for Maguire. So this is when he becomes Keith Giffen, the layout artist for sure. He started with Alex Saviuk in an issue of DC Comics Presents. Then he did it for Steve Lytle to justify Giffen's name being on the actual book. But now it's become his thing. He's now the layout artist, and occasionally he would do a backup in case, just to give the new penciler some breathing room. Who, by the way, he did the first 12 issues. Kevin Maguire drew the first 12 issues on time. He was drawing quickly. But for these couple issues, Keith Giffen drew the backups. And again, it's this very specific pocket in time where he's coming into his own for the first time. It's just pure Giffen. You don't see any other influence here. You don't see Toth. You don't see Munoz. You don't see Kirby. You just see him. Sure, you could have a little influence here and there, but as a general driving force, this is pure Giffen. So issues 9 and 10 of the Justice League International, and this solution, this punchline, this resolution right here, that was used later in Grant Morrison's Invasion crossover issue with the Hawk people, the Thanagarians. This time he drew an entire issue. After the 12 issues that Kevin Maguire drew, he was doing the whole issue for issue 13. This is important, and I'll tell you why. Because I was missing this issue as a kid. I was a regular buyer of the Justice League International, and I jumped on too late. I started buying those regularly in issue 18 and started buying back issues, and issue 13 eluded me. Great Batman. Great close up. This is that close up I was talking about earlier, the eyeball, nose, mouth crop. Great shot of the Suicide Squad. 9 panel grid, 6 panel grids. It's just a grid. This is basically what he would give to Kevin Maguire, likely in stick figure form, but he was drawing it himself. Great atmosphere. Again, underrated master of mood, statting a panel, which means just you draw it once and then you photocopy it, paste it up. Absolute classic shot of the Suicide Squad. Oh my lord. I'll tell you why this is important. It's because this is part one of a two-part series. Now, this is a Spanish reprint. I do have the English version of Suicide Squad number 13, where the story continues. However, it doesn't feature Keith Giffen art, so it's not pertinent to our interest right now. However, by the way, double cover by Steve Liloa and Al Gordon from one angle to another. This Spanish reprint reprints the issue we just saw, issue 13, right? Crisp lines. It's always the foreign editions that look better sometimes. Yeah, pretty much all the time actually. Not some, I'm just trying to be nice, but really it's just the ink line is stronger, the colors pop. It's great. Now this is big because this issue, Suicide Squad 13, this was one of my very first comics, and this issue in particular is what got me hooked onto everything. Suicide Squad, Justice League, DC in general. And it's really just a big fight scene between two groups in an abandoned Russian prison. How are you not hooked after that? But anyway, it was very cool to see the Giffen art, prime Giffen, pure Giffen, as I'm stating. I'm claiming that now. It's pure Giffen because it's just all him. You don't see anybody else but him. There's a lot more where that came from. I mean, he did this back up in the Suicide Squad Annual number 1. Let's see. Yeah, Bob Oxner. Haven't seen him since the Ambush Bug days. This is a quieter story based on the Private Lives feature that ran in DC Annuals that year. And it's just a quieter look at some behind the scenes of one of the characters, Amanda Waller. Pretty quiet, cool stuff from Keith. Now he also drew Amethyst for the Who's Who. Who's Who would always update their work. This is Who's Who update 87. So we saw a couple or a dozen actually, of profiles in the last episode, and it was drawn in his old style. This is sort of the in between. This is in between. He also drew the Legion of Superheroes, had a Who's Who. There you go. They were so, I got to tell you, they were so popular. Just for context, they were so popular. They had the Legion of Superheroes regular title, the Baxter, then the newsprint, then they had this, the Who's Who, which was a 7-issue series. And Keith drew that, again, in that sort of in between style, and that dark side with a super long arm. I love it. I love it. It makes him more menacing. And this, by the way, just a quick flip through of this. This is, there's an introduction to the mythos drawn by Steve Lytle, fantastic double cover by Steve Lytle. Same thing with this issue, more Steve Lytle. And Keith drew this Validus, just a big old baby with an exposed brain, drawn in this, again, in between style. It's kind of softening up, actually, these ink lines. I know that's not him inking, but it leads to his return to the Legion. He's flirting with a return. This is an anniversary issue, so naturally it has a bunch of artists. They were good like that, the Legion. Every time there was a special thick issue like this, they would call upon older artists to come in and draw a segment. Dave Cockrum did it a bunch. Mike Grell did it a few times. But Keith Giffen, being one of them now, he had been away from the Legion for a while, did this little 4-pager. And you could tell that it's already a little softer. The naturalism, Maguire was rubbing off. The staging was a lot smoother. He still had his weirdness, his setting, and the cropping of that eyeball. Keep that in mind. He's just that's his thing. But the Maguireisms were in full effect at this point. Look at this, which is marked by mouth shapes, really, and brows. Human expressions. That kind of smile, that's straight from Maguire. That sort of smirk, that's a Maguireism. Um, Ty Templeton, he would do some of that too in his own way. So he would eventually be a good fill-in artist for the Justice League International. Keith also drew this introduction to this issue. This is the third issue of the Who's Who in the Legion. And again, it's like everyone's a little, I don't want to say rounder and softer, but there's a smoothness to it. It's still very strong. It's all very powerful stuff. He drew creepy, menacing dudes, beautiful women, just really simple lines, it's not like over sexified. It's just almost like Jaime Hernandez level of care and respect into these figures. He's got the cartooniness down, pretty simple shape, so that's fine. Got this guy smirking, nice glance, nice respectful authority figure. I mean, it's all good stuff. And just to compare and contrast, this is the old Who's Who. We covered this last time, right? And so he drew Dr. Fate because he's known for Dr. Fate. But he drew Dr. Fate yet again. Let's see. You could tell the difference already in just a couple years. It's stronger. The figure work is better. It's just a bolder approach. He's gotten rid of this. He beefed him up, but the shape making is way stronger. It's essentially it's the cape doing the same sort of arc, but this is just way stronger. And this is that Maguire influence. You could tell. I mean, look at the creases along the sides of the cheeks, the rounder heads. Then he would also draw in this same issue, Green Flame, who will be known as Fire eventually. But even just notice the faces in the background, very Maguire-ish. So this is his Maguire phase. We've approached it. Kind of a cute, almost anime face to Beatrice. Now he's going to be doing a couple more Legion things. Um, I just want to go over some of them. There's that. See if I could get that. Saturn Queen, pretty casual pose. And Nemesis Kid. Pretty standard pose. That's a little bit more casual and that looks cool. You don't really see characters just sitting down that relaxed. I thought that was interesting. More heads coming up. But first, Omen. Remember Omen from his Von Eden era? Now he's doing it in a Maguire fashion. And it's cool. It's great. Couple heads right there. And that dude. These are great. If you could get them, get these. They've got tons of artists. Tom Artis, Ty Templeton, just a bunch of early Rob Liefeld, Jim Valentino. He drew these based on his Great Darkness saga. These are based on other characters. This is like the future version of Orion and Superman. And this might have been drawn a little earlier because, I mean, these are so graphically designed anyway that there's no way to make them natural because they're just so intense looking. They're so cartoonish in that regard. He would draw these dudes, these minor characters, Vibrex and Vizilad. And then, so for yet another update, there's a Who's Who update 88 this time, number 4. He would get Wildfire. He redesigned Wildfire. And that's definitely the Maguire style, but he redesigned him when he returned to the Legion in full force. Now this is it, guys. This is it. Legion of Superheroes 50 with DeCarlo on inks. Mike DeCarlo. Remember him back in the Omega Men? But what you get is that smoothed out Keith Giffen. You get the Maguire Giffen. And you could still tell it's Giffen, he's matured a little bit, and it took him collaborating with Kevin Maguire to reach that sort of sophistication. It's sleeker, it's more considered, but it's still cool looking. It doesn't mean it's boring comics. These color holds are great as always. This is like a huge fight issue where the time trappers just story wise this is pretty pivotal. They're just fighting the time trapper, especially in a post crisis world. I mean, great weird solutions. I mean, this is just interesting stuff, and again, this is great arc. I mean, he wouldn't have done this before and pulled it off. If he tried, I don't know if he would have pulled it off. He kept it pretty simple, but and safe. Not safe. That's the wrong term, but this is a pretty subtle body movement in this, and just it's all great. It's all great. I think he's learned a lot while working. He was still working, again, not in a major way, but he was working. Now he drew a bunch of these. He stayed on the Legion for the rest of this with maybe just a couple of fill-in issues. But these are my favorite. I got to say. This is like, to me, peak Giffen, peak Legion. It's head to head with the 5 years later, which is coming up. But this just serves a different purpose. It hits my different buttons because it's from a specific time period. Again, it's when I discovered this stuff. Not Legion necessarily, but the DC universe in general. Now, Mike DeCarlo, who's usually kind of a scratchy inker, is pretty faithful to the smoothness. He could be smooth. Great redesign of Phantom Girl, right? So he does Wildfire. He kind of updates. He gives them civilian clothes. He gives The Legion, he puts them in pants and jackets. It still looks stunning. I mean, Polar Boy is still in his costume. These boots make him look like he has stumpy legs. That's funny. But again, great settings, great architecture, great characters, great action. That looks like maybe some reference was used. That's very specific. Shadow's very specific, but it works. See what I mean? Like it's just very different. It's funny to spot that sometimes. If you can make it work, that's make it seamless. That's cool. But he's going for it. He's going for a more natural thing. He's going for a more natural style. By the way, fantastic Steve Lytle covers. He was the cover artist for a lot of this Baxter stuff. Couldn't really stay on as a monthly. He put in a lot of issues as a monthly artist, but he became primarily a cover artist for the series. He was doing Doom Patrol around this time. Great, great stuff. I mean, really underrated stuff. And I got to say, for this issue, to me, this image is ubiquitous because it was in every house ad at the time. This is oops, Tail Gunner Joe, a direct market book. But then he would also show up in newsstand books. There you go. Let me do side by side. They both look great. And this is on a Superman comic. This I did get in real time. And I recently got it signed by the mighty Carrie Gamble. Look at that. Sidebar. But yeah, that was, what did that say? This ain't your dad's Legion of Superheroes or something? They're not kids anymore. They're not kids anymore. They're here to kick your ass. And look at Ultra Boy and his beat up, battle damaged gear, and the new Dawnstar and the new Wildfire, yet remodeled again. This is great, great prison break. Lots of villains, lots of fighting, lots of cool sci-fi, futuristic action, drama, pathos. It's all here. It's all here. Paul Levitz, I gotta say, he was about to quit Legion. He was on his way out, but he stuck around one more year to work with Giffen, just one last time. So this is it. He was really bringing it. I think he did a great job. This is some of the best Paul Levitz work ever. Now this issue of Justice League, Giffen drew it. Ty Templeton inked it. That's all. That's all he did. I mean, Ty Templeton drew the inside with Joe Rubenstein inks, but this is a good Giffen Maguire ish thing, and you could see it here. I'll show it to you in a second. Here it is in black and white, in glorious black and white, without any text. And this is for Amazing Heroes. Sorry, Comics Interview. Don't mean to get those confused. It's an honest mistake. I hope you can forgive me. This is fantastic. What a great team. To be honest, Ty Templeton is a great inker on anyone. Doesn't dominate, but you could still tell it's him. It's so clean. It's perfect. And then here's a solid interview between Keith, no longer smiling. He only smiled in the early years. Now he's like, get that camera out of my face. What are you doing? Great black and white version. Well, that's a stat, but it's cool to see. Talk about the Justice League's popularity. We're now in year 2 of their domination of the field, to the point where Giffen was now in charge of Invasion, the big crossover. There was Crisis on Infinite Earths, started it, then it was Legends, then it was Millennium, and now it was Invasion, in which he introduced the concept of the meta gene, which is sort of DC's version of mutants, you know? And so it started, this is the 3-issue miniseries. It started with McFarlane. And these were 80-page books. McFarlane was drawing the Amazing Spider-Man at the same time. And I don't know how he did it. but he drew the hell out of this stuff, you know. But he couldn't keep up, so he had to concentrate on Spider-Man. So Keith Giffen, this was his project, so he's like, screw it. And by the way, it was written by Bill Mantlo, some of Bill Mantlow's last final works. But he reunited with Giffen, his old buddy. And Giffen is in full Maguire mode here. I mean, good lord. Let's see. Who was inking him? Al Gordon. Just in case. You never know with these books. It has several inkers, but yeah, it's Al Gordon. See, that kind of reminds me of Rubenstein a little bit. Full on Maguireism, drawing Maguire's characters essentially, drawing Suicide Squad members. This is so it's so up my alley. You don't understand. I mean, if you know me, you know that this is a huge deal for me. Him drawing the DC universe during this time, it's just it's just the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Tons of aliens, lots of spaceships, lots of space action. Look at that classic Maguire smirk, classic Maguire mouth, whatever that is. I mean, I did it too as a kid. I'll pull out the old comics. I don't mean to. I don't like showing that too much. It's like showing baby pictures. It's like it's not interesting to anyone but you. But I was drawing those little curls and mouths on my comics. Like the Maguire effect is not to be denied. It is. It was real. Other people started doing it. Ron Lim did it in print. Uh, Liefeld started doing a couple things here and there. Megaton days, and later on, I mean, it was he was a hot artist, Maguire, and he remained so, and it was because of this Justice League book. So anyway, Giffen drawing great war. And by the way, this is he pretty much redesigned these Dominators, and this is again like the story suggests, it's an invasion. Keith Giffen was a huge fan of Mars attacks, and he will later on work on that property. But this is sort of his first flexing of that Mars attacks love. It's so excellent. I mean, him drawing Aquaman, Captain Atom, just all these characters. It really gives the DC universe this sort of unified aesthetic that is just peak to me. Now, probably because of that invasion issue, we have this fill-in issue where he only drew a couple pages. Well, he drew a segment, but you got Ernie Cologne. Great. I mean, look at that. Great setting. Great Maguire mouth. This Superman looking like Sylvester Stallone. Garcia Lopez. Next to Eric Larson. Back to Giffen. Fantastic. Now, I got to say, for these next two issues, I got to give it up. These are the best thing right here. I mean, these are inked by Al Gordon. Again, I love Mike DiCarlo's inks, but there's something about these issues that is peak Giffen during this period. I mean, let's start off with his rendition of Emerald Empress has always been top notch. And this, I mean, this is really next level, from the haircut to the fashion to her attitude. It is just it's just insane. It's just so good. And by the way, this character gets murdered because Eric Larson designed him in the previous issue right here. Only drew him a couple times. And Keith Giffen just didn't want to figure out how to draw him from a profile. So he had him murdered, had him tortured to death. There's his severed head still talking, and then she cracks it further, cracks his head open, and starts tasting his blood, purple blood. Oh, amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. Dawnstar and Wildfire finally getting it on, and she's going to have burn marks as proof of that. Finally, the fans are getting what they want. But again, the Baxter paper is the optimal delivery system for these stories. It's just so cool. This is just a huge action comic. Um, and it's just bubbling. It's just Paul Levitz knows that he's leaving and it's ending, and there's a change coming, and so he's just tying up loose ends. You know, there are her burn marks. Look at that. Just little details like that are pretty cool. This bit of weirdness. That's just a straight up Maguire. I mean, that's just him. But it does allow Giffen to add these little subtle moments, these little details to expression. I think he by the way, this character, good lord. It just opened up his toolbox. Now he already had a good sense of design and pacing. I mean, this costume, the scope of this panel is great. The staging is great. And yeah, it's just a huge climactic scene that, spoiler alert, it's pretty brutal. I mean, Emerald Empress gets her butt kicked and eventually gets murdered or killed off. And that leads the way to this villain issue, but Giffen drew, and Al Gordon, by the way, I should say, drew this segment. Mark Bright drew the rest of it. And then this leads up to the Magic Wars. This is it. This is it. Home stretch. Home stretch this. One last thing though, right before we get out of Maguire era, appropriately enough, this Justice League International Annual #3 has a couple of who's who profiles on the back, and they were drawn by Keith Giffen in that Maguire stage. But he's really already getting out of it. It's a little angular, but the faces maybe you could tell. But nah, this looks like he's already done with Maguire. He's on to the next. These are printed sort of poorly. I'm sure they've been reprinted in the omnibus edition, but they're still cool, you know. They're still cool. Yeah, this seems like it's post Maguire. So that was it. That Legion of Superheroes fill in, because now we're back to the last. This is it. This is it. And I gotta say, these are just so strange. I mean, Al Gordon is back for this one issue. I guess he never left. I guess he just did like 4 issues in a row. But you'll notice that it's the 9 panel grid now. So Keith Giffen is sticking to it. The Maguireisms are very subtle. You might get a couple of faces, a couple of mouths here and there, but it's not evident. It's not clear. It's it's pure Giffen. We're back to pure Giffen, but with a like I said, with more skills, with more stuff under his belt. Paul Levitz is really bringing it home. He has this subplot that's going to pay off in the end, and great Steve Lytle covers with this has happened a few times where Keith Giffen would draw the title, the logo, and the actual art, and this is sort of carrying that tradition one last time. Yep, 9 panel grids, Al Gordon, great looking stuff. And so, see, this is an ad for the Maguire collections, and it's this kind of stuff. If you're not familiar with him, if you're watching this, I know you are. I'm just saying that just in case. I don't want to assume that you all know all these details, but that's where Giffen was coming from. This aesthetic, and now he's back to his own. He's got Kirby behind him, Munoz behind him, Maguire behind him. He's done. He's moving forward. It's all this forward momentum. He's got the weird Lord of Chaos mouth. Okay, so now this is the strange part. This is super strange. I can't explain it. Mike DiCarlo, usually a scratchy line, sometimes gets brushy. When he was inking Jim Aparo on Batman, he was pretty brushy. This doesn't look like DiCarlo to me. I don't know if it was And these are the final two issues of the Baxter edition. This is the end of an era right here. This is it. This is it's over. They're gonna take a little break for a while. The Legion offices, but this it doesn't look like. Not only does it not look like DeCarlo, it just looks rushed. Dare I say, amateurish. I mean, that looks like just a bad application of lines. Even if Giffen were to actually make lines like that, which there's no proof that indicates that he would do that, why would you even be faithful to that? Just make it look cool. That there's no excuse for that. And that sort of weird sloppiness is evident throughout this entire issue. It just makes no sense. Mike DeCarlo is a fine inker. It just doesn't look like him. Maybe he was experimenting on these issues, but it's just I don't know if it maybe it got away from him. It's like he's using markers and not nibs or brushes. Very odd. I mean, come on, this is straight up Power Comics. If you're not familiar with Power Comics, you should look it up. It's great. It's great not for the Legion, is what I'm saying. Very odd. Keep in mind, it's still very much Giffen. It's still the 9 panel grid. It's setting things up. It's setting the tone up for what's coming. Final issue. This is it. This is Paul Levitz's signature issue. Atmos gets his comeuppance, gets punched in the face for being creepy. Real creepy, good lord. Stat panels. Uh yeah, it's a weird ending, not because of the writing or the art, but primarily the inking. It's so out of character. But this is a fine last splash. It's a nice splash. Got some nice text pieces back here. But we got two more major ones for me. And then it's the shift. And then it's the big shift. This is Giffen right here. This is definitely Giffen. Now, this Giffen, again, inked by Al Gordon, this is when he's really leaning into these backgrounds where it's just jam packed. It's a lot of, it feels cramped, right? It feels like there's just stuff surrounding, framing the figures. Just everything is filled to the brim. There's no real open space. So it's between that and extreme close ups that really identify this work as Keith Giffen. This is a Keith Giffen comic for sure. I like this Batman with the yellow emblem. He's stocky. You don't really see him. He's just in shadow, but you could tell he's stocky just by the small ears, the big head. It's fantastic work. And you know what? I don't think he drew this last page. I think some staffer may have drawn it in that style, but that doesn't look like Giffen at all, really, and especially not that. Like this doesn't look like someone did it. It's unclear. I don't have any information about that. Maybe the editor Mark Wade might. So he did Batman, right? And he did Superman back to back. 9 panel grid, written by Roger Stern, the great Roger Stern. Roger, if you're listening to this, I love you. And you know this. Fantastic shot of Superman looking down at this hole in the earth. Some backstory for what's been going on. It's Superman in the snow. What's this looks like fun to draw. And some subplots from the story. It's mostly just silhouettes. Who I'm pretty sure he started that trend. Frank Miller took it, and but Giffen did it first in that creeper DC Comics presents. Everyone did that. Arthur Adams, John Byrne. I mean, this is a funny approach. It's a Superman, but let's see. He fights a big creature. It's all good. good paneling. This is the only thing that kind of breaks the 9 panel grid, even though it's still 3 shots. It's fun. Again, it's pure Giffen. You don't see anyone else but Giffen here, and it's being applied to Superman. As always, his explosions are fantastic, very kinetic, very organic. I believe this was recently reprinted in an omnibus, but this is an old reprint, a British version of this stuff. These are There's an issue by Dan Jurgens, which is followed by that issue that picks up. Back then, all the 3 titles of Superman interconnected, and so this was just the next step. Now, just again, compare the printing. I want to drive this home. It's superior over there, even though the paper. Yeah, no, it's the same. It's just a different kind of paper. It's brighter, the colors pop, and the inking's sharper. What can I say? It's just cooler. And it's bigger. It's bigger. Look at this. It's a bigger presentation. It's great. It really works. It really works. Batman. He did a pinup for this right around the same time, and in that same sort of style that we saw earlier in that Clayface story. There you go. Now again, that's very Munoz, but it's all very Giffen. It's a sort of the randomness of the backgrounds and the foregrounds. It's just a moody, cool piece. This piece was repurposed for subscription ads, which is just a terrific visual, right? So around this time, Keith was interviewed in the premier comic book magazine for the public. This was everywhere in every, not Barnes and Noble, but there was like Walden Books and B. Dalton's in the mall and just bookstores. You would always see this, and he got a feature in here talking about not only Invasion but the books that came out of Invasion, which is not many. In fact, he was in charge of a lot of them. Justice League Europe is an offshoot. It's when an event sparks a bunch of different titles. It's an excuse for the line of books to grow. So they also gave way to Invasion, gave way to Legion 89, another Keith Giffen plotted and laid out story featuring connected characters to the Legion of Superheroes in the future, but it takes place in real time, in our time, interacting with the real DC, the current DC universe. Talks about the Suicide Squad crossover, and kind of tells about talks about the whatchamacallit, the crossover being not popular with other creators. Like they just sort of they didn't they were off put by the fact that he came up with this concept of the metagene, as if that was robbing their own agency with their own characters. Whereas Keith saw it as like an easy way out. You could use it or you could not use it, but it was a general gift to the DC universe, which is still being used, I believe. But anyway, because of that, not many people were excited about like creating new concepts for this or spin-offs from the series. They just wanted nothing to do with it. Next up, for the next episode, we're going to be talking about the 5 years later. This cover was drawn on the eve of that. Also, you could see it here in this little catalog, this nifty catalog of the dozen of trade paperbacks that DC used to put out. The golden years, really. But anyway, this cover collects the Great Dark Saga, which, as you could see, it's printed in just the stock that they were using for trades, which is way better. And he drew this little segment too, sort of a bridging chapter between between issues. You only get that in this collection. Like, this didn't exist in any of the issues that we've been looking at. And again, it's in that Maguire mode. So it's probably before that Batman story. It's only a few pages. But see, he draws those weird characters very stylistically. But the rest, it's his old stuff. This is his old fan favorite days. And it includes this poster, fold-out poster. But anyway, the 5 years later, oh, there's that little extra from the annual. That's when he was changing his style. But 5 years later, that is when he took the reins of Legion of Superheroes entirely. He was in charge of the art, deeply plotting with Tom and Mary Bierbaum, who wrote the Thunder Agents we discussed last episode. Or was it this episode? What is time? It's been a while. No, that was last episode. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, that's a lot to unpack. And so it's fun to see this on the eve of that, because it sets it up. It just sets it up. And there's just so much to cover, not only story-wise, but editorially and behind the scenes, and the way the reception was insane. But artistically, I think that is even more pure Giffen. And it is, I think, the last time he was really invested into a project to that degree. I think it just, he gave it his all. And it's not that he didn't give it his all before, but you gotta see it. When I show it to you, you'll know what I'm talking about. He really went through the ringer for that project. And I think it's worth it, because I love it. But I could see why Keith would have thoughts and feelings about it. But anyway, that's that's just a preview of things to come. So hopefully you'll join me next time so we could unpack it together. I could show you all these comics and all his artwork in our mission to look at everything that Keith Giffen has drawn in his multi-decade career. So thanks again for stopping by. I really appreciate you being here, and hopefully I'll see you again. So thank you.
Fiffe Files.